When the widowed rancher of Wyoming hired a quiet young cook, he never imagined she would sketch the face of his dead wife perfectly, as if she'd known her in life. In the lonely windswept hills of 1876, Ethan Cole lived only for work and silence. Since his wife's death, he'd sworn off companionship, keeping his heart locked behind walls of grief. Then came Clara Wynne's gentle hands, downcast eyes, a woman who spoke little but saw everything. She cooked, cleaned, and disappeared into her small room each night, until one evening, Ethan found her forgotten sketchbook. Page after page revealed drawings of his horses, his ranch, and then his wife's portrait, rendered with impossible tenderness. Who was Clara, really? And how could she know the face he'd never shown anyone? As snow closes in and strangers ride toward the ranch, Ethan will uncover the truth that binds Clara to his past and risk everything to defend her from a man who claims her as his own. In the end, under the burning western sky, love and loyalty will clash with the law itself, and the woman he once hired to cook his meals may be the one to save his soul. Bitter Hollow Ranch lay quiet beneath the first breath of winter, the hills dusted in white like ashes scattered across old wounds. Wind hissed through the pines and rattled the shutters of the weathered ranch house, where Ethan Cole stood on the porch with his coffee cooling in his hand. Every sunrise looked the same since his wife, Mary, passed gray, silent, and heavy. The land was alive, but he was not. The house behind him told the story of that emptiness. A woman's touch had once lived in every corner, curtains sewn by careful fingers, wildflowers once set in glass jars on the windowsill, but time had stripped it all away, leaving only the faint scent of smoke and loneliness. Inside, the clatter of pans broke the quiet. Clara Wynne moved with practiced rhythm, sleeves rolled high, auburn hair tied in a loose knot that caught stray beams of morning light. She had been on the ranch for 6 months, and had already become part of its silence. She spoke little, ate alone, and worked until her hands ached. Ethan barely noticed her beyond the tasks she performed. She was reliable, steady as the sun that rose over the snowfields. Yet lately, something about her calm unsettled him. The way she lingered near the window when dusk fell, eyes fixed on the distant ridge as if waiting for something or someone. That evening, when he sat down to supper, a small leather sketchbook waited beside his plate, its edges worn, its presence unexplained. Ethan hesitated before touching the sketchbook. The cover was worn smooth, smelling faintly of charcoal and lavender soap, Clara's scent. She must have left it there by accident. Curiosity won over manners. He opened it slowly, and the air in the room seemed to still. The first page held the outline of the ranch, his ranch captured with haunting precision. Each fence post, each shadow of the cottonwoods near the barn, perfectly drawn. Turning the page, he found sketches of his horses, his blacksmith, even the old trail hand who rode in once a month for supplies. But then, his breath caught. There, in soft pencil strokes, was a woman's face, a smile he knew by heart. His late wife, Mary. Ethan's pulse quickened. No photograph of her had ever existed. They couldn't afford one. Yet here she was, every curve, every glint of tenderness in her eyes. He stared, torn between wonder and dread. How could Clara know what Mary looked like? A faint sound made him turn. Clara stood frozen in the doorway, flowers still dusting her apron, her expression pale with shock. "I didn't mean for you to see that," she whispered. Ethan rose, the sketchbook trembling in his hands. "Where did you learn to draw her face?" Her eyes glistened. "Someone in town told me about her. I thought, maybe you'd want to remember." For the first time in years, Ethan felt his walls crack. Outside, the wind howled across the Wyoming plains, carrying the promise of a storm and the first stirrings of something far more dangerous than snow. The next morning broke cold and still. The sky over Bitter Hollow hung low with snow clouds, and the ranch yard lay cloaked in pale silence. Ethan rose early, as always, but his mind wasn't on the cattle or the frozen pump. All through the night, he'd lain awake, replaying the look on Clara Wynne's face when he'd confronted her, the guilt, the fear, and something else he couldn't name. He found her already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, kneading dough by lamplight. She didn't look up when he entered. "You're up early," he said. "I always am, Mr. Cole," she answered softly. You're usually gone before the coffee's poured." He lingered by the doorway longer than he meant to. The lamplight carved her features into something gentle and strong, and he felt the same confusion rise again, the one that had kept him awake. "About that sketchbook." Her hands stilled in the dough. "I suppose you think me foolish." "May. I think you're talented," he said, stepping closer. "But I need to know why. That drawing of Mary, how did you capture her so exactly?" Clara's voice trembled. "I asked about her in town. Mrs. Langley at the general store said she was kind, with light hair and eyes that smiled even when she didn't. I meant no harm, sir. I only wanted to give you back something you'd lost." Ethan swallowed hard, a knot rising in his chest. "You've done that," he admitted quietly. "But now I can't stop wondering what else you've seen." For a heartbeat, silence filled the kitchen, thick as the winter air outside. Then, gently, he said, "Join me for supper tonight. It seems wrong to eat the meals you cook alone." She hesitated, then nodded. "As you wish." That evening, the snow began to fall. For the first time since hiring her, Ethan set 2 places at the table. Clara came wearing a clean calico dress, mended at the sleeves, her hair brushed loose around her shoulders. She looked nervous but composed. He poured her a cup of coffee, the gesture clumsy but sincere. "Where did you learn to draw?" "My father taught me," she said, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "He was a portrait artist in Philadelphia, not a famous one, but skilled. He died when I was 16. Then you traveled west alone." "I wanted to see the places he used to paint the wide skies he dreamed of. I had no one left back east." Something in her tone caught Ethan off guard, a mixture of loneliness and defiance. She wasn't the timid woman he'd thought her to be. She had steel beneath the softness. As the fire cracked in the stove, they spoke of the world beyond Wyoming, the cities she'd seen, the rivers she'd crossed, the war that had changed everything. Ethan realized he hadn't truly spoken to anyone in years. But when he asked why she chose his ranch of all places, her gaze fell to her cup. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "a woman needs to disappear for a while." A knock at the door broke the fragile calm. Ethan rose, rifle already half drawn. Few men came this far up the valley without cause, and none after dark. "Stay here," he told Clara, but she was already gathering dishes. Her face suddenly drained of color. He opened the door to find Sheriff Tom Keene dismounting from his horse, snow clinging to his coat. "Evening, Ethan," the sheriff said. "Sorry to trouble you. I'm looking for your cook." Ethan frowned. "What business do you have with her?" The sheriff's expression turned uneasy. "A man in town's asking after her. Says his name's Thomas Wynne. Claims she's his wife." Behind Ethan, a dish shattered on the floor. Clara stood frozen in the lamplight, eyes wide with terror. "That's not possible," she whispered. Sheriff Keene looked at her gently. "He's got marriage papers, ma'am, signed in Philadelphia 2 years ago." Ethan turned toward her, his stomach twisting. "You told me you came here alone." "I did," she said, voice trembling, "because I thought he was dead." Later, when the sheriff had gone, Ethan found Clara packing a small satchel in her room. "Don't," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "I have to," she replied. "If he's come this far, he won't stop. I can't let him ruin your life, too." "You think running will fix it?" Ethan stepped closer. "You said you came here to disappear. What did he do to you, Clara?" She hesitated, then drew a shaky breath. "He wasn't a kind man. He hurt me. When word came that he'd died in a factory fire, I felt free for the first time. I changed my name, started over. I thought it was over." Ethan's jaw tightened. "It's not over until we say it is. You're under my roof now, and no one's dragging you off this ranch." Tears welled in her eyes. "You can't fight the law, Ethan." "Then we'll find a way around it," he said. "You're not alone in this." But she only shook her head. "I've been alone for a very long time." The next day brought more than snow. Around noon, Ethan spotted 3 riders on the ridge, one dressed too fine for the weather, the other 2 rough-looking. He set down his hammer and went to the porch, rifle slung across his arm. The leader dismounted with practiced arrogance. "Ethan Cole, I presume. My name is Thomas Wynne. I believe you have something of mine." Clara appeared in the doorway, face pale, back straight. "You're not my husband," she said evenly. The man smiled coldly. "You're still my wife on paper. And I aim to collect what's mine, starting with the paintings your father left you. Ethan's stomach turned. You came all this way for money. For what belongs to me, Thomas sneered. And the lady, of course. Ethan leveled the rifle. The lady stays here. The man's smile faded. His hand drifted toward his coat. Careful, rancher. You can't shoot the law. Then you'd better prove you are the law, Ethan said. The tension broke like glass. One of Thomas's men moved first, and Ethan fired. The shot echoed through the valley, scattering the horses. The second man lunged, and the two crashed into the snow, wrestling for the gun. Clara screamed, ducking behind the porch rail. The world narrowed to smoke, noise, and fear. When it was over, one man lay still, the other clutching his arm, blood staining the snow. Thomas stood a few yards away, face twisted with rage. You'll pay for this, he hissed. The sheriff will see you hang. One? Then I'll hang protecting her, Ethan said coldly. Thomas turned and fled toward town. Night fell hard and fast. Ethan sat by the fire, reloading his rifle, hands shaking from more than cold. Clara sat across from him, silent. Finally, she spoke. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. She looked into the flames. He won't stop. He'll bring the law next time. Ethan nodded. Then we'll be ready. Her gaze met his, steady now. What if there's another way? He frowned. What do you mean? A marriage of protection, she said quietly. If I'm your wife, his claim means nothing. The law can't take another man's wife. The room went silent. Ethan stared at her. You'd marry me just to be safe? She gave a faint, sad smile. You're the only man I've met who sees me as more than a burden. But yes, only for protection. Ethan's heart pounded. Clara. He wanted to tell her he'd already fallen for her, but the words stuck. We'll think on it, he said instead. Before dawn, hoofbeats thundered again outside. Ethan grabbed his rifle and stepped onto the porch. Thomas Wynne had returned with the sheriff. Sheriff Keene looked grim. Ethan, I need you to stand down. This man's produced a marriage certificate, and under territorial law, he has rights. Ethan's jaw clenched. You know what kind of man he is. Doesn't matter, the sheriff said softly. Unless she remarries, or the papers are proven false, he's within his claim. Ved. Behind Ethan, Clara stepped outside, her breath fogging in the cold. It's all right, Sheriff, she said. I'll go with him. No. Ethan turned sharply. Don't. She met his eyes, calm and resolute. Trust me. As she passed, she pressed something into his hand, a folded note. Then she mounted Thomas's wagon without another word. When they disappeared down the snowy road, Ethan opened the note. He's taking me to the Red Rock Inn in town. Bring the sheriff. The certificate's a forgery, the date has been altered. The proof is under my bed. By sundown, Ethan was in the saddle, racing toward Bitter Creek. He stopped at the sheriff's office, slammed the note onto the desk. Keene read quickly, his expression hardening. Forgery's a serious charge. Let's finish this. They rode together through the frozen streets toward the inn, snow whipping their faces. Upstairs, muffled laughter and the clink of bottles marked the right room. The sheriff raised his voice. Thomas Wynne, open up. The door cracked open. Wynne's smug face appeared. Evening, Sheriff. Come to congratulate me? On a forged marriage? The sheriff snapped, kicking the door wide. Inside, Clara sat stiffly in a chair, one cheek bruised, eyes blazing. Two of Wynne's hired guns hovered by the window. You're under arrest, the sheriff declared. For kidnapping and fraud. One of the men reached for his pistol too slow. Ethan fired first. The room exploded in chaos, shouting, gun smoke, the flash of muzzle fire. When the smoke cleared, both hired men were down, and Wynne lay sprawled against the wall, clutching his shoulder. Clara rushed to Ethan's side. You came, she whispered. Did you ever doubt it? He murmured. Hours later, as the prisoners were led away, the sheriff turned to Clara. You'll have to testify in Denver, but you're free now. That man's marriage papers won't fool anyone again. She nodded, exhaustion etched across her face. Thank you. Ethan helped her into the saddle for the ride home. The stars burned cold above them, the snow gleaming like silver. She leaned back against him, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt warmth seep through the cracks in his soul. What will you do now? he asked quietly. She hesitated. I don't know. Maybe keep riding west. Maybe start painting again. He tightened his arm around her. Or maybe stay. The ranch could use another hand, and I could use another reason to live. She turned slightly, meeting his gaze. Are you asking as my employer, or something else? Ethan smiled faintly. As a man who finally sees what's been in front of him all along. When they reached the ranch, dawn was breaking. The house glowed with lamplight, soft and golden. Clara paused on the porch, looking out across the valley. Funny, she whispered. I came here to disappear, and somehow, I was found. Ethan touched her hand gently. Maybe that's what home really means. Winter loosened its grip on Bitter Hollow by the time Clara regained her strength. Snow still crowned the peaks, but the meadows below were greening, and the streams ran high with meltwater. Yet despite the beauty returning to the land, a quiet unease hung between her and Ethan. The house, once filled with the sounds of chores and daily rhythm, now felt strangely still. Ethan worked longer hours with the cattle, and Clara painted late into the night, light spilling from her studio window like a silent confession. Every so often, she caught him watching her from across the yard, eyes searching, conflicted, but neither spoke of what had happened in town. One evening, as the sky burned orange over the hills, Clara found him mending a fence by the creek. His hands were cracked and raw from cold and rope, his face shadowed with something she couldn't quite name. You've been avoiding me, she said quietly. He paused, hammer mid-swing. You've been busy painting. That's not what I asked. Ethan sighed, set down the hammer, and leaned against the post. You're free now, Clara. You can leave whenever you want. I didn't want to give you reason to feel trapped again. Clara stepped closer, her boots sinking into the thawing earth. I stayed because I wanted to, not because I had nowhere else to go. He looked up, meeting her gaze. Then why does it feel like you're halfway gone already? Her breath trembled. Because I don't know what you want from me, Ethan. One moment you risk your life to save mine, and the next, you look at me like I'm some ghost you're trying to forget. Ethan turned away, the wind catching his hat brim. Maybe I am. When I saw you that night in the hotel tied to that chair, I thought I was losing Mary all over again. It's a hard thing to come back from. I'm not her, Clara said softly. I know, he said, voice cracking. But sometimes I wish I didn't. The confession landed between them like a stone in still water. Clara felt her throat tighten. She'd loved a man once who used love to cage her. Now she faced another who feared loving her at all. That night, she packed her sketchbook and a few brushes into a small satchel. The next morning before dawn, she saddled her mare and rode away from Bitter Hollow without a sound. 3 weeks passed. Ethan tried to bury himself in work. The fences, the herds, the endless miles of empty land, it all kept his hands busy and his mind distracted, but nothing could quiet the ache of her absence. Her studio stood dark, the scent of turpentine still faint in the air. Sometimes he found himself standing at the doorway, half expecting her to be there, brush in hand, humming softly as she painted. One afternoon, Sheriff Keene rode up with a letter. Thought you'd want to see this, he said, handing over an envelope sealed with a smudge of blue wax. Ethan unfolded it carefully. Mr. Cole, I'm safe in Denver. A gallery owner saw my sketches and offered to exhibit my work. I owe that to you for letting me live here long enough to remember who I was. If you ever find yourself in the city, look for me under the name Clara Wynne. Maybe by then I'll have earned the right to be found again. C.W. Ethan read it twice, then folded it back with shaking hands. She's making something of herself, the sheriff said. Yeah, Ethan murmured. She always was. Months rolled by. Spring turned to summer, and Bitter Hollow came alive again, the meadows bright with wildflowers, the creeks alive with trout. Ethan told himself he was fine, that a man could live with ghosts if he kept busy enough. But each sunrise, he found himself looking toward the east trail, half hoping to see a dust cloud rising in the distance. One evening, as he rode back from town, he found someone waiting by the corral. The setting sun caught auburn hair and a blue traveling coat. Clara stood beside her horse, her hands clasped tight around the reins. Ethan froze. You shouldn't sneak up on a man like that. Her smile was nervous. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. I wasn't sure you'd come back. I almost didn't. She stepped closer. But I realized something in Denver. I painted the mountains, the rivers, the faces of strangers, and every canvas looked like this place. Like you. Ethan dismounted slowly. And what brought you back? Her voice wavered. I kept thinking about that night. When you said maybe I could stay. Not as your cook, not as your protection, but as myself. Did you mean it? He met her eyes. Every word. Clara took a deep breath. Then there's something you should know. When the gallery opened my exhibit, a man came to see me, a lawyer from Philadelphia. He said Thomas Wynne died in custody. Before he passed, he confessed to forging the papers, to the insurance fraud, to everything. He even left a letter clearing my name completely. Ethan let out a slow breath, a mixture of relief and anger. You came all this way to tell me that? No, she said softly. I came because now that I'm truly free, I needed to choose where to belong. Ethan looked at her, and for the first time since Mary's death, he didn't see grief. He saw the living woman in front of him, warm and defiant beneath the Wyoming sky. Then stay, he said quietly. Not because I saved you, not because you owe me, but because you want to. Clara smiled faintly, eyes glistening. Then I will. Their days fell into a new rhythm. Clara painted the valley in full bloom, her canvases alive with color and light. Ethan worked the herds, his laughter returning little by little. They ate together each evening, sharing stories instead of silence. But peace never lasted long in the West. One afternoon, as a storm gathered over the hills, Sheriff Keene rode in hard. Ethan, bad news. That lawyer from Denver sent word. Wynne wasn't working alone. There's a partner still out there, someone hunting for those paintings Clara's father made. And he's coming this way. Ethan's blood ran cold. When? Soon. Maybe tonight. The sheriff tipped his hat. Lock your doors. By dusk, thunder rolled across the valley. Clara and Ethan boarded up the windows and loaded the rifles. Lightning flickered through the clouds like white fire. Do you regret staying? Ethan asked quietly as he handed her a pistol. Clara shook her head. Not once. Whatever happens, I'm done running. They waited in silence until hooves echoed through the rain. A lone rider dismounted, calling out over the wind. Mrs. Wynne, I believe you have something that belongs to me. Mel. Ethan raised his rifle and stepped onto the porch. A flash of lightning revealed the rider's face, young, mean-eyed, and holding a shotgun. Those paintings aren't yours, Ethan shouted. Then whose are they? The man sneered. Yours? The thunder drowned out Ethan's answer. The man fired first. Wood splintered, glass shattered. Clara screamed and ducked behind the doorframe, returning fire with trembling hands. The battle lasted minutes but felt like hours. When the smoke cleared, the intruder lay motionless in the mud, the rain washing blood into the dirt. Ethan lowered his rifle, breathing hard. Clara stood beside him, soaked, shaking but alive. She looked up at him through the rain. He was after ghosts, so were we. He cupped her face gently. Not anymore. The storm passed before dawn. The land smelled of wet pine and new beginnings. They buried the man quietly in the far field, marked only by a single stone. When the sun broke over the mountains, Ethan turned to her. Clara, I've wasted too many chances to say this. You saved me long before I ever saved you. Will you stay here? Not as a guest, not as my employee, but as my wife. Tears slipped down her cheeks, mingling with the morning mist. I thought you'd never ask. He smiled. Took me a while to see what was in front of me. By summer's end, a small wedding was held under the cottonwoods. The townsfolk came from miles around. Clara wore a simple cream dress. Sunlight caught in her hair like gold. Ethan stood tall beside her, his weathered hands trembling as he slipped a ring onto her finger. When the preacher asked if they took each other freely, Clara's voice was clear as the wind itself. I do. And when Ethan spoke the same words, the valley seemed to exhale. 1 year later, their home had changed again. The new barn stood strong, and Clara's art studio glowed with light each morning. On the wall hung a portrait, Ethan and Clara side by side, painted by her own hand. As he watched her brush the final touches onto the canvas, Ethan smiled. I told you you'd make this place beautiful, he said. Clara turned, eyes bright. You did that, Ethan. I only helped you see it. Outside, the sun rose over Bitter Hollow Ranch, painting the world in gold. For the first time in years, neither of them looked toward the past. They had finally found home in each other. The Wyoming summer settled warm and slow over Bitter Hollow, carrying with it the hum of cicadas and the smell of wild sage. For the first time in years, the ranch was alive not with loneliness but laughter. Ethan and Clara worked side by side, the rhythm of their lives fitting together like the pieces of a story that had always meant to be written. In the mornings, he rode the fence lines while she painted from the porch, her easel facing the sunlit valley. The brush moved easily now, no longer burdened by fear or guilt, only by beauty. Each stroke was a memory reclaimed, the color of dawn on the hills, the shimmer of light on a horse's flank, the shadow of Ethan's hat brim as he looked toward her and smiled. Sometimes, as she worked, he would come up behind her and slip an arm around her waist, murmuring, "You know, you're spoiling me. A man could get used to being someone's masterpiece." And she'd laugh softly, leaning back against him. "You're already part of one." When the first shipment of her paintings sold in Denver, she used the money to rebuild the small schoolhouse in town. "For the children who'll never have to run from anything," she said. Ethan rode with her to the dedication, standing proud as she handed the keys to the teacher. Folks who once whispered about the rancher's mysterious cook now spoke her name with respect. Mrs. Clara Cole, artist, wife, survivor. But at night, when the lanterns burned low, they still spoke softly of what they'd endured, the past that had shaped them both. Ethan often woke from dreams of the firelight in that hotel room or the snow that night she first said, "Trust me." One evening, he sat with her on the porch, the mountains silhouetted black against a crimson sky. "Do you ever wish," he asked, "that you'd chosen differently? That you'd gone to California instead of staying here?" Clara shook her head slowly. "I used to think freedom meant distance, but now I know it's not where you run, it's who's waiting when you stop." He turned to her, rough hand finding hers. "I thought I'd used up all the love I had in me," he said. "But then you showed me something I'd forgotten, how to live for tomorrow instead of yesterday." A soft wind moved through the valley, carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers. The sun slipped behind the ridge, and the sky turned the color of fire, fading to ash. Inside the house, on the mantel above the hearth, rested a single framed sketch, the portrait Clara had once drawn of Ethan's late wife. Beneath it, another, the two of them together, eyes turned toward the same horizon. Ethan rose and took Clara's hand, guiding her inside as the last light vanished. "Come on," he said, voice low, warm. "It's late, and tomorrow's got work waiting for us." Clara smiled, letting him pull her close. "Work," she murmured. "Always the rancher's word for love." Then, he laughed quietly. "Then I reckon I'll keep at it as long as I can." Outside, the wind swept gently through the grasslands, rustling the cottonwoods that shaded the house. The same land that had once held his grief now held his peace. And as the stars rose steady, endless, and bright, Ethan Cole finally understood what Mary had meant, long ago, when she'd told him love was not a fire to burn, but a light to guide. He looked at Clara, her auburn hair, her steady eyes, her quiet strength, and felt that light shining again. For the first time since losing everything, he didn't feel haunted. He felt home. Years passed quietly in Bitter Hollow. The ranch endured droughts, storms, and the turning of countless seasons, but within its weathered fences, life found a rhythm as steady as the ticking of an old pocket watch. Travelers passing through Wyoming sometimes stopped at the valley's edge, drawn by stories of the painter's ranch. They spoke of a woman who captured the soul of the West on canvas, and of the stoic rancher who stood by her side, two souls bound not by luck, but by trials survived together. Inside their home, Clara's studio glowed with morning light. On the walls hung a series she called Resurrections, portraits of people she and Ethan had known, neighbors, cowhands, even the old sheriff who'd once saved her life. But at the center, above all others, hung her favorite, a self-portrait of her standing beside Ethan, the valley stretching wide behind them. Her hand rested over his heart, and his eyes, though shadowed by a hat brim, shone with unmistakable warmth. Ethan never spoke of the pain he once carried, nor did Clara dwell on the ghosts she'd escaped. They had outlived sorrow, not by forgetting, but by turning it into something beautiful. Every dawn, Ethan saddled his horse, and every evening, he returned to find Clara waiting at the porch with paint on her fingers, and a smile that still made his heart stumble. One night, as they sat watching the stars above the darkened hills, Clara rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Do you ever think about how it all began? About the day you found that sketchbook?" Ethan chuckled low in his chest. "Reckon I do. Never thought a forgotten drawing would lead me here." "So she smiled softly. "You saw me when I was just a shadow." He kissed her hair. "No, Clara. You were the light that found me." The wind moved through the valley, then warm, familiar, carrying with it the scent of sage and rain. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, answered by silence, so peaceful it seemed eternal. And beneath that vast Wyoming sky, the man who once buried his heart and the woman who learned to live again sat hand in hand, their love as enduring as the land itself, wild, scarred, and beautiful.